it will help cover the DBQ stuff as well.
Wait, we're doing another one in the paper? And the paper? I thought you said our paper was the DBQ.
Well, your DBQ is going to be a little bit different, the honors classes. You still have to have an element of it on your exam. But it's not going to be, yours will be a little bit different.
Okay.
But I'll tell you that the day before we take it. That Tuesday. But for the DBQ, guys, remember you need outside information, specific examples. So some of the stuff is good as well. So let's go to the beginning. With the agricultural revolution, there's no specific questions on the agricultural revolution, right? But what you need to know is sort of that it caused the industrial revolution. Because what was going on during the agricultural revolution?
More food.
More food, right? So
Population growth.
as you have an adequate amount of food, more food leads to more people, exactly.
Labor.
So now more people. Okay? People are living healthier. They're living longer. Life expectancy is greater, right? The chance of you surviving infancy increases. But with the new technologies and the new farming ways, like, with the enclosed, talk about how they switched rotated farms and stuff, not as enough people were needed on the farms. So where do these people go? The cities, right? And this helps lead to the Industrial Revolution. Make sense? Okay? So urbanization, there's more people in localized areas. They're working in crowded conditions. A lot of the cities are polluted. We learned about all those things. More people in dense areas. It's crowded, it's polluted. At first, a lot of them worked in cottage industries, which means they worked in their homes with specific crafts, specialization of labor. But eventually, those machines don't fit in their homes. So where do people start working? Good. They start working in factories. With these machines, these jobs where you punch the clock, and all those sorts of things. What was work like at the factories? Okay, the conditions weren't that good. Long working hours, exactly. Okay, so you're now in factories for your jobs. So the working conditions, like you guys said, long hours. They were dangerous. You're working with this machinery without safety provisions, without safety protection, without your goggles and all those things. Dark, not ventilated well, so not good conditions. Long days. So in order to combat these working conditions that were poor, what did lots of workers start to join?
Unions.
Good. So labor unions are, let's, form a group to sort of say, listen, we can't work in these bad conditions for these long hours. We want better wages. We want better conditions, things like that. And there's two main ways we learned two tools they used to try to get these across. Sometimes, right? Sometimes they would just say, well, listen, we can go on strike and not work for you. Or we could have representatives from our union meet with representatives of the employers, and try to negotiate something in the middle. What do we call that?
Bless you.
Oh, still allergic to that. Collective bargaining, I think someone said. Right? So strikes, collective bargaining was in. I know that you can obviously tell that says collective bargaining. I'm sure you can see that. Because of these conditions, of other political ideas, socialism, communism, things like that. Gee whiz.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you. Holy cow. Go back to working conditions. Besides long hours and being dangerous, who were some of the people that worked in these conditions?
Children.
Good. That's the one that talked to her. Besides the adults, right, we talked about child labor, very young children sometimes. The conditions that were bad for adults were obviously also bad for children, but there were no laws at the time to really, protect them. Why did often the employers like child laborers?
They were like small and easy to manipulate, and they were children, so you could beat them up.
And they were children. Some of them were beat. We had readings about that, yes. But the way you say it, they were children, so you could beat them up.
He's Indian.
It's a little scary, I guess. Joe?
They had low wages.
Good. So you guys hit the two biggest things. Pay less. I should say pay less, but that's okay. It's in the pay less shooters. Okay, so their size. They're fitting for, getting their hands in the machines to fixing, for crawling in mines that were small. They were doing the same work as adults, but women and children, even though they were doing the same job as a man, they were still paid less. So of course employers loved that. Alex?
They're more naive.
Oh, sure, right. Yeah, could be convinced to do any crazy job, right? Let's see. Let's step back a little bit. Besides the people going here and these being results, in order to industrialize, what did any country need? Three main things. Okay, resources.
Land.
Right,
Labor.
which is sort of
Capital.
tied in together.
Labor.
Yes. Capital. Labor. Right. They need the LLC. Right? Land for your resources, labor, people to work in the factories or in the mines getting out coal or other resources, and capital, money to invest into your business. Right? So you need that in order for it to happen. What country did it begin in? Dana?
England.
England, good. So England had land, labor, and capital, right? What specifically were the reasons why England was right for this to happen, for this to begin? There's a bunch of reasons. Just give me some here, Erica. Good. They had natural resources, specifically coal. Right? Coal is necessary for steam power, to run the factories, for the railroads, for the steamships to get their goods to market. Good. What else did they have in England?
Lots of people living there.
Okay, so which are good for
Labor.
good. And what kind of people were they? Did they know how to read?
They were literate and illiterate. They were literate or illiterate.
Some were illiterate, but as a whole, it was an educated workforce, right? And why that is important is so that they could read the manuals to how to operate these machines, things like that.
And they invented stuff.
Oh yeah, and they could be their own, eventually maybe become entrepreneurs or inventors. Good. What else? What else did England have? Okay, so money, what do we call that?
Capital.
Capital that they could invest in business. What else did England have?
Like waterways.
Exactly, yeah. All these waterways were good so that you had the power to run your machines, right? The steam power. It also meant you could get your goods to market faster and more cheaply, right? No area in England is within 20 miles of a river or an ocean. Nowhere, right? That's important. There's a bunch more. Let's get a few. What did England have all over the world?
Dominion. Oh, like little colonies.
Colonies, little and big, right? I'd say
America.
I wouldn't call India a small colony, right? So colonies meant that you have new places to get resources from, and you also had people, new markets to sell your stuff to. What about the climate in England?
Relatively good.
We were just talking about
Right.
that.
Oh, we're talking about it?
I was
Well,
like,
you
oh, I
could've
think
shared
weather
it.
is like important. She was
And
like,
then I'm like, I don't think so.
No, it was. The climate, it's very damp. If you ever go to London and it drizzle, it doesn't downpour a lot, but it drizzles, it's foggy. That dampness is good for growing cotton. What industry is what began the Industrial Revolution? Cotton.
Textile.
Or textiles, even besides cotton, other woolens and linens and silks. Well, not silks a whole lot in the beginning, but so therefore, that before they were acquiring cotton from, say, the American colonies or India, which they got a lot of it from, they were able to grow it themselves. Those are the big ones. There's others, but those are the big ones. Oh, what kind of government do they have? Stable government, right? This was not in the midst of a revolution or a new government. The government was stable, and they sort of allowed the English businesses, hey, you want to go make some cotton textile thing, whatever, that's up to you. And in fact, their government was not only stable, but they pretty much left the businesses alone. What do we call that type of government? The French word.
laissez-faire. Right,
Right, laissez-faire. So, there's good and bad about having a laissez-faire government. They didn't say you need to have a minimum wage of this much. They didn't say you can't let your workers work past these hours without paying them overtime, right? We're not gonna worry about what kind of pollutants you're putting in the air, right? We're not gonna worry about all these different types of tariffs. So it's good because it allows business to go and to grow. It's bad because then some people are exploited, right? One more thing with the Industrial Revolution. Lots of different, technology brought changes in lots of different areas. You know, communication with the telegraph. What about transportation?
Steam engine.
Good. So the steam engine made what two big forms of, what two types of transportation go?
Railways.
Okay, so we got the choo-choo trains, because you gotta say choo-choo trains. So the railways, and also
Boats.
what kind of boats?
Steamboats.
Right. So, I mean, think of what it's like when you're taking your goods across by horse and carriage. Think of how costly that is. Think of how long it is. Suppose if you were growing cotton in India, you had to like put it on a ship, send it, and put it on a carriage, right? Now with the railways and steamships, things go more quickly and the costs go down. And this makes more goods affordable to more people. And this is when you start seeing a mass revolution in society. Now, okay, so that's the Industrial Revolution. You got that? Questions on that? No? Yes? No? Okay. So remember what's needed for the Industrial Revolution. Now you need that land because you need these natural resources. Think of England being a fairly small country. It's an island. So you have this coal to fuel your factories, but eventually that's going to run out. They need a big reason for imperialism is because you need more resources. So Japan imperialized because it's a small archipelago. It ran out of resources. So where do you get your new resources? Well, from other places. So imperialism connects to Industrial Revolution because they were looking for new resources and also new markets. Now, not only can we get resources from these places, we can have more people to sell our goods to. Right? So, when you think of the causes of imperialism, you have these as causes because they're looking for new resources, they're looking for new markets. So that's basically economic reasons. We learned about the social reasons, the political reasons, feeling of national pride, blah, 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 right? People to fight for your country. but most of it deals with economics. And this is a new form of mercantilism. We learned about mercantilism in the first age of imperialism, what we were talking about as colonization. The idea of acquiring as much gold and silver. The more that you had, the more powerful of a country you were. Now this theory has evolved. So it's not just acquiring precious metals, it's acquiring anything that's going to help your economy. So even acquiring raw materials like coal, like cotton, is going to make you more powerful. Acquiring colonies. Remember we looked at those maps of Africa and which country was competing to acquire as much land as possible? So mercantilism sort of takes on a new form.
Is that basically more land with more power?
Yes. So these are reasons. Now there's also the social reasons, the sense of, well, nationalistic reasons. Some countries felt superior to others. There was this prejudicial mindset, a racial mindset. We discussed a scientific so-called validation of these racial ideas. What did we call that? Well, it was dehumanizing. Remember we talked about, we saw the cartoons of them comparing people to monkeys and stuff. But if you're justifying, we should take them over because we should survive because we're stronger. They need to either adapt or become extinct. What was that?
Darwinism.
Good. Not just Darwinism,
Social
is
Darwinism.
social Darwinism. Good. So this term, social Darwinism, actually didn't come around until much after. Even the social Darwinists of the time, Herbert Spencer, did not use this term, but that's what we call it today. Social Darwinism. Imperialism happened all over the globe. Asia, the Americas, even within Europe, we learned about like in Ireland. But where do we focus a lot of our research on? What continent? Well, like today, our class learned about it in Burma, but where else? Right, Africa. We spent a lot of time in the fields of Africa. Right, Heart of Darkness people? Okay. So Africa, all of Africa, except for Liberia and Ethiopia, were eventually colonized. What was set up to help Europeans not fight, so to speak, over the land in Africa?
Borders.
Well, they created borders. What specific event?
They created nations to act as the borders.
They did, but there was like a meeting, let's say.
Oh, the Berlin
Yes.
Assembly.
Conference.
Berlin Conference. Good. So the Berlin Conference was where they helped like, divide up Africa, and like she mentioned, they ignored cultural borders, right? It was more just where the colonials thought their borders should be. And then that had all sorts of effects that we talked about. Africa had lots of raw materials, whether it be crops or even things like diamonds and gold. And this is also lots of new markets too, right? Lots of people in Africa now to sell their goods to. What's the poem and the cartoon we saw about feeling obligated to help certain people?
The white man's burden.
Good. So the white man's burden. It reveals what? When they call the indigenous people half devil, half child, when they call them sloths and heathens, what's it suggesting? How do we feel about them?
That they are inferior to the superior race of Europeans.
Okay, good.
That they're not as bright and useful as them.
Exactly. Good. Right? They're not as smart as you are. You need to help them because you are superior, they are inferior. So this reflects some prejudices, right? This idea of the classes today that read Shooting an Elephant, you see a lot of the same themes in White Man's Burden as you do in this. So it reflects prejudices as a social Darwinist element. But like you said, they also thought we're doing the right thing. They didn't think we're doing this because we're mean, racist people. They really thought this was a noble cause. Why else would you send forth the best of your society to go do this? So they thought westernizing was improving the globe, right? Thought it was a noble cause. No, we're Christianizing. We're sharing education with them, all these things. Some of the results of imperialism, right? There's tons of results of imperialism. What's some of the positive results of imperialism? Alex?
People in Africa were more educated.
Okay, so whether it's in Africa or in other parts that were imperialized, often you improved education, set up schools, taught people how to read. Education was often part of missionary work. Teach them to read, then teach them how to read the Bible. Usually you don't follow. What else improved besides education?
They had more communication.
Okay, so all infrastructure, which would be things like communication with the telegraph, transportation with railways, setting up bridges and roads and canals and all those sorts of things, new sewer systems, all sorts of things. What else did they help with?
Create a global economy.
Okay, now that's something that's probably positive and negative, but it's positive because it gave you more access to more goods, right? Things you were not exposed to before. What about things like setting up hospitals? Right? So you think of health, setting up hospitals, bringing doctors and nurses in, vaccines and medicine. So there's some health improvements. Of course, we also brought down some diseases, but that's a whole other ballgame, right? What about some negative results? Thoughts?
Culture's destroyed.
Right. Cultural destruction. Right? Hey, you don't speak that language around us, you speak this one. You dress this way now. You practice this religion now. Right? So many cultures either died out or at least meant to feel inferior. Did you hear that? No? Yes? Or no? What other negative?
Introduced new diseases.
Okay, so you could have, if you're not immune to something, you might bring in disease. Jelena?
They kind of messed with nature.
Oh, definitely. Environmental destruction. Right? When you're mining to find diamonds and gold, you're gonna ruin the earth. When you're farming, you may cut down jungles for cash crops. Factories bringing pollution, runoff into waterways and things like that.
The Europeans became greedy and lost their morals and values.
Okay, so it's just sort of exploitation and all sorts of right. If you go in for missionary work, but you also sort of mentioned that there was negative effects for the imperializers then as well. If you're losing your way, so to speak. Handle the negative. These are all the main points. Are there questions on this? Time to just that up. What's that? The DBQ is going to be on imperialism. So you want the causes and the effects of imperialism. Causes, think of all this stuff we talked about, and effects, all these things we talked about. But remember, you want specifics for your outside information. So if you have something on the Berlin Conference, that's maybe not in the DBQ, or something about social Darwinism, or maybe a specific example from something, that would be good. I know you guys did this, but since you were here, I need you all these little things. So maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. A video of this will be up on tonight also.
With the future,
It's the bone drink. I think if you look on our channel, there's a link. If you look to a link to any of my videos,
Have you seen
it's on
those?
channel.
I haven't seen those.
Yes.
Oh my God. Sounds good. They never stop.
What's that?
They just keep exploring.
Slavery began before this era
the
began.
entire world.
I guess it was a little more.
It's like
research.
It's like,
and in some areas it was ended, but you have a different form. A specific effect as an information. Remember we learned about the Belgians in the Congo? The 10 million Congolese that died, King Leopold? That might be good extra information to use. I'm just reading. I always like to see if there's differences. Go down there. Like you guys do better when people are different. That's good.
They can positive when they need to. Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Yes. Can you change it? Is there any here? There should be.
Where's that?
There should be.
See. That's me. Long time ago.
Dana, I bought one today, but I'm probably gonna buy another one. I'm probably gonna buy another one someday. So, I don't have money today, though.